We're talking about Browdergate, the Bill Browder story that is behind much of the Trump-Russia narrative. You know that story, Garland, about the meeting at Trump Tower?
Yep.
Remember? And the Russian lawyer, Natalia.
That's where I first heard about the Magnitsky Act.
That's right. A lot of people, they first heard about it. By the way, Fox News has been awful on this. There's no media source that has even tried to challenge the facts about the Bill Browder narrative, as I'm saying, that are posted in a deposition that he took under oath. That's the thing. He never answers these questions under oath. We're talking with filmmaker Andrei Nekrasov, who just had a very interesting, who's had an amazing journey on this film because, so you made this film, Andrei, and Bill Browder has tried to shut you. Can you go over the history of how and where Bill Browder has tried to shut down you showing this film?
Well, it's actually started while I was still making it and interviewing him. Bill Browder loves talking to the media, but only if a journalist is basically prepared to copy-paste his Browder's version of the event. He's very clever about not allowing anybody who might challenge his version. And he certainly believed that I was just going to copy paste his version, and that's why I had access. But you know, I wasn't basically cheating on him because I genuinely believed him, but I started to doubt, and had some very simple, very polite questions for him. And the moment I asked those questions, he completely changed. I remember his body language. He became confrontational. He became aggressive. He walked out of an interview, that interview, saying that basically I was spreading the Russian government propaganda, and that was it. So he was basically he started this campaign against my film even before the film was finished, simply because. And I, by the way, didn't even know most of the things I know now. I just simply had questions. So basically, the next that was the spring.
Well, let me ask you one question about that. There's a deposition of Bill Browder that was taken in 2015 in New York City in a case called U.S. versus Prevezon Holdings, and it's a long deposition. And have you read that? Have you looked at that deposition?
Yeah, yes, of course I did, yes.
Now, that deposition, if you contrast, like you say, when Bill Browder goes on the media, when he's in front of the Senate, he's very smooth, right? They're likable. Seems very reasonable. When you read this deposition, he falls all over himself. He cannot answer the most simple questions. He obfuscates. Am I accurately, what was your impression of the deposition?
Well, absolutely. He just doesn't remember anything. And yes, if you take his book, The Red Notice, it's full of details, which, like basically a great fiction, a thriller fiction, but fiction in all senses of the word, which means, one of it, which means not true, where he remembers like details, but the way Magnitsky was walking into an office, the way a police officer who Magnitsky allegedly accused, that police officer's hands were trembling, and yet he doesn't remember, basic facts about his own business. He doesn't remember when and for how long he was a director of this or that company, who, by the way, was then, proven to have been involved in a fraud. And so his memory is extremely selective. And of course, his body language, because this deposition is taped, and I use some of that footage in my film. There's no self-confidence he shows at all those political events where he explains, presents his story, in front of the I'd say very gullible American politicians.
So once again, we're talking to Andrei Nekrasov, writer and director of the film The Magnitsky Act, behind the scenes. So you made this film, and this film ran contrary to the Bill Browder narrative. Now you're going to get that film out there. It's a documentary. You're confident that this is the truth. And as you see it, you started off believing Bill Browder. You make this documentary, and in the course of the documentary, when you review the evidence, you're like, well, wait a minute, this story doesn't hold up. So you feel that your film, The Magnitsky Act, behind the scenes, is an accurate representation of reality as you see it. So what happens? I understand it was actually shown at the museum in Washington, D.C. Talk about the pushback.
Well, we'll talk
and the
about that
censorship.
because that directly relates to that's why Natalia, that's part of the reason Natalia Veselnitskaya was in town. But the museum thing, getting shown here, you'd already been censored a couple times, correct?
Well, 3 times, I think. Basically, the premiere at the European Parliament was cancelled at the last moment, with people already in the wait in the audiences in the room, waiting to see the film. We couldn't see the film. We couldn't show it because the Browder's lawyers have basically attacked everybody involved in trying to show it. And then a film festival in Norway had to pull the film for the fear, basically, for.
And they pulled the film due to pressure from Bill Browder, correct?
Yeah. Yes. And then what I find extremely troubling, the biggest public European TV network, Arte, its German branch, ZDF, basically cancelled the film at the last moment, where already with the trailers, already running, and film having been announced. So also under the pressure of Bill Browder, and that network's boss told me directly he was afraid of Bill Browder's lawyers. You mentioned one of the biggest TV networks in Europe are afraid of Browder, and then I would say that then a political pressure started, a political pressure to basically denounce my work as Russian propaganda, because officially it was just a legal case, but then. And legally, it's still just a legal technicality, but the perception in the press, for example, in Europe and in the German press, is that the film presents a Russian version of the events, which is completely false, because film is totally independent, very well researched. So this is telling me that Browder is basically helped by a Western political establishment. That's what's troubling. Not my kind of technical, my production company kind of exchange with some television executives about what can be perhaps cut out, because Browder has, which I think very strange, has a right to not to allow his footage, the interview he gave me to be aired. This is just the surface. The real story is that there's a kind of censorship. In countries which claim not to have any censorship, and not at all a dialogue, which should have happened over the facts, with me being an opportunity to defend my position, because I was attacked in the press, and my answers were not published. So this is a very clear, political attack on a story which was researched and told in a totally independent and democratic way.
Once again, we're talking with Andrei Nekrasov, the writer and director of The Magnitsky Act, behind the scenes. You know, what has been surmised by many people, including me, is that the Magnitsky Act, that the Browder story and the subsequent legislation that's been spreading called the Magnitsky Act was kind of the opening salvo for a lot of neocons on both sides of the Atlantic that wanted to revive the Cold War, and that they don't really care whether or not Browder is telling the truth because it's politically convenient to get the Cold War going again, and that this was the kind of the start.
I'd go slightly further than that, Garland. Here's what I would say, because you're putting it to the neocons, and that's fine, and I don't completely.
Not just the neocons. A lot of people who would want to do that.
When you look at Browder's Senate testimony, he is a Rorschach test, basically. Whatever you're trying to promote, as long as it's anti-Russia,
right.
Whether it's if you're anti-Trump and you want to say the Trump Tower meeting shows Russian collusion.
Yeah, it works.
Browder, yep, that's right. The Russians will do anything. That's what he says, literally. If you're a Republican, so you're trying to attack the Democrats, and you're like, but Fusion GPS was hired to attack you, right, Bill Browder? Because you know a lot of Republicans don't like Fusion GPS because they were hired by the Democrats to do the anti-Trump thing. Browder's like, yep. So, I mean, have you noticed, am I on to say, in other words, what I've noticed about Browder, and you've interviewed him, you've talked to him, we'd love to have him on the show. I'm skeptical he's going to come on. But
I don't think he will.
But have you noticed that personality, that chameleon-like personality trait in Browder? That he adjusts his story to fit who he's talking to a little bit.
Yes, he is, of course, a kind of a formidable, I'd say, political and media operator. One can't deny that. But it's not just because of his talent. He's so successful. There's an obvious help. He's being helped by some politicians who don't mind being mentioned as part of his campaign. But I'm sure those are just tip of the iceberg. He unelected, not holding any public office. He's become a public figure. Why? Only because he was making money in Russia. And I personally think that this is no longer a Russian story. I think the West should be asking questions. The West should be worried that somebody like that, with his only kind of credit is that he was successful in making money in, by the way, fairly dubious situations, and here I am again criticizing Russia. But Browder was a part of that system, which is in many ways corrupt. So, and that's the only kind of track record we can talk about.
Well, when you say he was making money, let me ask you this: who was he making money for? Do we know who the investors were behind the scenes who were investing in Hermitage Capital, his company, who he was making money for?
Well, I mean, officially it was HSBC and in the UK, but there was another branch of those operations which probably was making money for a fund for Ziff Brothers. This is an American group. But this is a very long story, and we won't. That's why my film is over 2 hours long. I wrote a book. Alex Kreiner wrote a book, so we won't be able to cover everything here. But it's the question of anybody, with the kind of with right democratic instincts in the West should pose why this person has such an influence. What's behind this? Why the facts are not being checked? And I can say that they haven't been checked. Even Browder's allies, like Andreas Gross, the European Swiss politician who allegedly investigated the Magnitsky case in the most in-depth Western investigation for the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Even he admits that the Americans had not really investigated and didn't check the facts before passing the Magnitsky Act and United States law, and then other countries followed. So, we should be all very alarmed about this.
Let me make sure we get this in early. If people want to, you say you have a book. Is your book out yet?
Well, I wrote it in Russian, and it's out in Russian. Yeah, it's Exmoor Publishers published it. And
is an English translation coming, or
it's going to be translated? Yes. Well, it's being translated, and I hope it's going to be published. Yes.
Well, you'll have to let us know.
But let us know where people. This is the important thing. Where can people, if they're interested in seeing your film, what can they do to see your film that Bill Browder does not want them to see?
Well, I mean, we're still having problems with the publication of the film. It's a long, complicated legal story. I won't kind of bore you with it, but you can ask my producer, and he may be able to give people kind of individual links. But we do hope to be able.
So right now, there's still no mass way people. By the way, I don't expect this is going to be up on Amazon, Garland.
Oh. I don't think Bezos is going to be pushing this.
Yeah.
One.
So this is the thing. The posters out there. Well, and where can people follow you on Twitter? Where's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Let's ask that way.
I'm on Twitter. I haven't been very active on Twitter. I'm sort of fairly new. On Facebook, and I really hope the film will be published soon, as it should have been already 2 years ago. As I said, it was made for mainstream Western European organizations, and it's just a scandal. It hasn't been. So we're now kind of a little bit in a limbo on our own with my producers, with all these TV networks which were behind us and supporting us. And by the way, agreeing with my version, my final version, and praising even the film from a sort of creative point of view. And it's all in the records, in those emails. They wrote to me, great cinema, but only after Bill Browder's pressure. It's kind of there was a question mark over the film. So frankly, it's a scandal. But we're not giving up, and of course we're going to publish it.
Well, Andre, we're not giving up either. We've been covering this story extensively. We're going to continue to do that here at Fault Lines because, as you say, it's a complex story, and Americans should be absolutely concerned about how the media and the U.S. political system has been manipulated. Andre Nekrasov, we would love to have you on again in a couple weeks. Great segment, Garland. Look, again, Bill Browder can't. We're on the one network I know Bill Browder's not going to intimidate. You're listening to Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan.